as a child, I was kind of like elaborate, a lot of experimentation with whatever we could try.
Welcome to today's episode of the She Dreams in Color interview series. I am joined today by Michelle Murchison. I'm very excited to share Michelle's occupation as a children's picture book author and her personal obstacle of being diagnosed at 18 months old with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So Michelle, we're going to jump right in. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you. I'm so nervous and anxious sometimes because we dive into so much that I want to make sure we cover it all, but we also keep it moving. So
Sure.
The first thing we love to talk about on She Dreams in Color is occupation. So let's start with your occupation. You actually were in the corporate world for 15 years, right?
Yeah. So I started in corporate training and development. So I've worked in training, writing training, delivering training for learning and development teams for my whole career.
So is that when we have to do the online, read it, hit yes, answer a quiz, is that learning and development?
Yeah, absolutely. Or if you go to a class and somebody teaches you in person, so all types of delivery methods. But I'm an instructional designer by trade, I guess you would say. So writing and developing training classes and engagement activities in the classroom, and also e-learning, which is what you're talking about.
Okay. So you did that for 15 years, and then how did that feel? What was that about?
I never thought I would be in corporate, period. In college, I would have told you I was going into nonprofit or event planning or something of that nature. And it kind of goes with my obstacle, which is when you have a chronic illness, you have to have health insurance. And so I had to figure that out really quickly, right out of college, right? Because I was responsible for myself at that point and started getting a lot of really big bills. So it turned out that all of these paths I went down to try to look at the things I really wanted to do didn't give me health insurance and didn't pay me enough to pay for all of my health needs, right? So it's kind of a weird cycle with health insurance that you have to have it. And at the time, I couldn't lose health insurance.
Because of the pre-existing conditions back then that changed under the Affordable Care Act with President Obama.
Exactly.
Which was what, 2016, 2012?
Yeah, not that long ago.
Right.
So my whole early adulthood was really, I never even took a day off work. So if I switched jobs, I started the next day to make sure I had health insurance.
Yeah, Cobra is like $20,000 a month.
Exactly. So I definitely couldn't afford that, especially in my 20s.
A lot of people have talked about in our interview series, and just people that we know, how health issues and medical needs and insurance needs, even still today, dictated the career path they went down, and then they were unfulfilled.
Absolutely.
So even though you loved it, did you still feel unfulfilled?
Yeah, I mean, I struggled to find purpose in that work. Luckily, I did find a lane inside of that did give me a bit of purpose, right? I was helping people. I was helping them learn, grow, do better at their jobs. But ultimately, I've always struggled with that. It's a lot of work, a lot of stress. Stress isn't good for me either. And it's not good for anybody, but it actually creates inflammation for me, so I have to really watch it. So I have always struggled to think about where could I go that would be more fulfilling for me, use all of my talent, but I can still make enough money and have the health insurance that I need. So that's always been my burning question ongoing. Yeah.
And so you have found yourself now as an author of children's picture books.
Yeah.
So that is a great calling and a great occupation for someone to pursue.
Yeah.
How long have you had that urge, that desire, that curiosity in the back?
For a really long time. I've always enjoyed writing. I love communication in general, and I was a communication major in college, but I particularly enjoy writing. I think I communicate best that way, and I have always written, remember back when blogs were new and cool? I had a blog. I had probably had 5 blogs. They're probably still floating on the internet because no one knows how to turn them off. So I was a blogger. I was just always constantly writing things. I probably had a ton of Word documents stored up on every computer I've ever owned, just writing down thoughts or stories, ideas for stories. So a lot of them kind of all over the place, memoirs type, children's book type. And so in 2020, in the middle, probably in the summer of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic that year, I started writing this particular children's book story. I think it was kind of my escape from like the day-to-day of the pandemic and my work and my kids at home, and had it on my hard drive for really 2 years. So last year, I was laid off from my corporate job early last year. And that while I was being laid off on the internet, on a computer, I was like, I'm finishing my children's book. This is my opportunity. And so I just took it.
Oh my gosh. You know, I have interviewed a lot of people over my career who've been laid off, and it's devastating and it's a loss.
Sure.
It's something you have to grieve and process. And so many times it opens the door to a whole new life, a whole new permission to do the thing.
Yes.
And so I love hearing that you, in that moment, knew this is it. This is the new beginning.
Yeah.
And that has to be really scary, but also so gratifying that you're finally walking in this, scratching the itch that you had.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now your children, now you said you had the Word documents and they were all over the place. You didn't do the recipe blogs for a while, did you?
No. I'm not, that's not me.
So how did you land on children's books, and specifically children's picture books? Because there's so many options in the literary world of what you could have done. Why did you go to that particular space?
I think there's probably two reasons for that. The first one is that my daughter is 6, and I have probably read 6 to 10 books to her a night, like all through her life, just because she really likes them. And so I've just read a ton of the genre, but also this age group is particularly the one that I'm reading in at my house every day. So I really think it's plain and simple because I get the age right now. So I often have a curiosity, like, will I continue to write at the level that I'm reading to my kids? But we'll see. And then the other reason is just that this particular story comes from an experience from my childhood at about that age. And so that's why I went with that particular, because within picture books, you have to pick an age range, and the industry kind of dictates like what those age ranges are. And so mine is more of that like 4 to 8 year old age range. And that's really because it happened to me during that time of my life.
And this ties back to your early diagnosis, 18 months.
Yeah.
You were diagnosed, and you said it's juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which
Yes.
it's a lot of words that don't go together, right?
Yeah.
So
We wish they didn't. Yeah.
explain, what is that, and what does that look like? What does that mean?
So juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which now I believe they call juvenile idiopathic arthritis, or JRA when I was diagnosed. Now it's called JIA. It's an autoimmune disease where there is something happening in your body that causes your immune system to overreact, and it attacks your own body. And where it attacks is in your joints. So what arthritis does is, very simply, it eats away at the cartilage in your joints. And once all of that's gone, it can also start to impact the bone. And so eventually you lose your range of motion. If you lose all your cartilage, it's bone on bone. So if you have a joint like this, your joints are rubbing together to move, right? You lose all the cartilage or cushion between your bones, and then eventually it's bone on bone, and your bone starts to wear and tear from grinding. And so eventually for me, what that means is my joints just stopped moving. So early on, when I was in the like 4 years old to 8 years old range, they would go in kind of frequently and do a surgery called an arthroscopy, which is where they go into the joint and just kind of clean out all of the scar tissue from the disease, because that is also restricting your movement. And that's now I think it's very like done very differently. So I think it's very minimally invasive. But they would just go in through a create a hole and go in and clean it out. So that's where my original scars came from that are on my knees. I have 3 on each knee from back then from arthroscopic surgeries.
And to be so young and deal with such an unusual disease, right?
Yes.
Such an unusual disease. And then all the medical procedures that come with that. There's a lot to unpack as a kid with that, for sure.
Yes.
And then to have scars, which is another thing, as a human, it can be hard to have scars, especially until you get to a point in life where other people have scars and you realize we are all scarred up. Our cars have dents in them. But it's really hard when you're the car with the dent before everybody else. It's embarrassing.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
So what was that part like, not just going through the medical experience, but then having the visual representations of that experience?
Yeah, so the medical experience itself has evolved significantly since I was a child. I grew up in Charlotte, so I'm a native, which is unicorn. And then when I was young and I was diagnosed at 18 months because I wasn't... I was trying to crawl, but I couldn't, and I was like pulling myself with my arms on the floor, and my knees started to swell. So my knees were really the first place where inflammation was starting. I was diagnosed, but there were no pediatric rheumatologists in Charlotte. A rheumatologist is a person who sees people with joint inflammation. So I had to, my family and I had to go to Duke or Carolina when other doctors from other states would do rounds through North Carolina, pediatric rheumatologists. We would have to go up there for the whole day and see everyone we could see in a day to continue to see what we could do for my disease. So my disease was really aggressive at that age because there wasn't much to do about it. It was back then very rare. And so it was a mystery. I mean, to be honest with you, autoimmune diseases are still a mystery today. People cannot look at you and tell you why it's happening. So it's hard to figure out what the upstream, what's going on, what's the root causes. You just treat symptoms. So as a child, I was kind of like a lab rat, a lot of experimentation with whatever we could try and see if, I failed it, then we would try the next thing. Created a lot more medical things. So from some of the medication I was on, I was actually in a coma for a while. It's a whole thing, right? So there's a lot of medical events that happened to me as a child. Pretty traumatic, turns out. It's my life experience. So sometimes when you don't realize how traumatic your life has been when it's normal to you. That's what disease feels like, right? Because for me, I think it's a benefit that I've always had it. I didn't lose ability necessarily. My life didn't change at like age 25 and I lost my motion. I've just always kind of had limited mobility. But to answer your question about the scars, having scars as a child, yes, was very... it's weird because I couldn't explain it, but of course I was self-conscious of it. So I wasn't seeing them on other kids. I realized that what I was experiencing, going to the doctor's office, having a bunch of surgeries, nobody else was doing that. So even really young, I was aware that I maybe looked different, walked differently, had some different things going on than most of the kids that I was around. It's very isolating for that reason. It can feel really lonely, or you can start to tell yourself that you're the only person that deals with this. And I still talk myself out of that to this day. So the scars, the stories, Stars on My Knees, is based on an event that happened in my life when I was young. My mom says that when I was around like age 5, 6, I would just wear pants all the time because I wanted to not to show my knees because I had 3 scars on each knee. And so even in the hot summertime in North Carolina, I would be wearing pants and sweating, and I would just sweat it out. I didn't care. I didn't want people to notice. And one night we had a babysitter who came over and was changing me into my pajamas or helping me. And she said, I didn't know you had stars on your knees. And I completely like flipped the way I saw myself. I started wearing shorts every day. I want to wear shorts in the winter. I wanted everyone to see my scars. I thought they were cool and unique. And so that's what the story is based on. Because I feel like it's important for kids to be open about who they are, what's going on with them. They'd be surprised to find out that other kids have scars too. Like you said, scars are a human condition. They're not just certain people. Everyone probably has one by the time they're 25, right? So kids get scars from falling off their bike, from falling off their roller skates. So
yeah.
This is what happens when I tell this story, by the way. This is why I wrote the book, because I realized that anytime I told that story, which I really didn't tell it a lot, because again, it's my life experience, it seems very normal and bland to me. But anytime I told the story about this babysitter, and this was a random babysitter, she was not a recurring babysitter for us, so I don't even know who she is. But the book's dedicated to her. People would cry or like have an emotional reaction, and especially moms with kids with scars, because they don't know how to talk to their kids about it. All they want is for them to be confident about themselves and not to feel self-conscious about it. And I was surprised when I started doing some research on it that there's not much out there to help explain that or talk about it. So I think we tend to stay away from talking about it.
Mm. Yeah, it definitely triggers that emotional response, because I think we've all at some point in our lives been in a position where we feel so alone, so different, so isolated for a lot of different reasons.
Yes.
And if we're lucky, we have some guardian angel that crosses our path and randomly drops information and just leaves. And if we're even luckier, we hold on to that gift that was given to us to change perspective and to change our outlook.
Yeah.
So what a really remarkable and beautiful gift to give you at such a young age.
Yes.
That you could internalize and change your narrative. And one thing I think is just really beautiful about you, how you own your narrative, is you call yourself Robo Girl.
Right.
And it's truly saying, this has happened to me, and you have a lot to unpack and you carry a lot of trauma from that, certainly. But this is how I'm going to write the story. This is what I'm going to call myself.
Yeah.
Because you've had joint replacements, right? And
Yeah.
early on, what was that?
Yeah, so I've had 4 total joint replacements. So I had my first knee, my left knee, when I was 16, my right knee when I was 17, and then my elbows were, one was right after my junior year of college, and then this one was 2021. So this one's recent. It took this one a really long time to get as bad as this one was. So it's just you never know when things are going to progress. But yeah, my knees were really, if you can imagine, they really don't want you to replace your knees when you're 16 years old, because you're still growing. So, I mean, we had really, my orthopedic surgeon had really put it off as long. It's the last straw, right? That's the last thing you want to do, is either fuse a joint or replace a joint, and especially in a kid. So I walked with a ton of pain. I mean, the story I tell about that is when I went in to have my first knee replacement, they were done with the surgery, came out to talk to my parents, told my parents that the front of my leg was broken when they went in for surgery, but it had healed itself enough to where they could still do the surgery. So that means I walked on a broken leg for 8 to 10 weeks, because they said that's probably how long it took to heal. I had no idea. No idea, because that's how much pain was happening already. That was my normal. I was going to school. I was doing my homework. I was like student council president. I was doing all the things, walking on a broken leg. So my mom, sobbing, like,
yeah,
like, Mom,
the guilt.
I had no idea. You don't have to feel guilty about that. I didn't know. I was fine.
Gosh.
But that's the level of pain we're talking about. I mean, my pain tolerance is high, really high. But all that being said, the joint replacement, by the time I went in for my first joint replacement, I was like sitting in the back of the car because I had to put my legs out straight. They just really
God.
wouldn't bend enough to sit normal in the back of a car. So we had really put it off as long as we could. Very rare that someone that age would have a joint replacement. So at this point in my life, my knee has been with me like longer than it hasn't. But it was life-changing. I tell everyone who needs a joint replacement, like, it's tough. You can do it. Like, it is worth it, 100%. The funny thing about my first knee is all of my surgeries in high school and college, I did on Christmas break or summer break. So I know when they were because I can remember. That summer, I would go to PT, and then one day, I knew them very well. I spent a lot of time with physical therapists, really hard on me, but I loved them, and then I would cry when I was doing it. Then I went and got my driver's license. Then I came back to PT, and I'm like, I got my driver's license. So that's just like, it's just a funny thing. I have a picture of myself with my license with my physical therapist. So it was strange. I have to say, I have always had really great friends, very supportive, always there for me. But it was kind of existential scary to be a kid, knowing you're going in surgery to get your knee cut out. Not to be graphic, but it's true. And then have a new metal knee inserted into my bones to hold in place, to carry my body. The night before surgeries was tough.
Yeah.
I would just, be trying to manage the anxiety of what could happen to me. So when you have a disease that aggressive or any type of chronic illness, medical issue that early in your life, you just grow up really fast. You think about a lot of things that you look around and people aren't thinking about that, right?
Yeah. What if I don't wake up from the surgery? A lot of young people are not thinking that.
Just death. There's a lot of thought of like things you have to consider that it seems like no one else is thinking about.
Yeah.
I still don't know if most of my friends could explain what their deductible or out of pocket is, right? So, and that's good.
You're 18 and you know.
I'm so glad they don't, but it can feel really isolating for that reason. It's just an interesting. It's an interesting experience.
And I appreciate you sharing your story on our interview series because you're not the only one and people aren't alone, but we don't talk about this. We don't talk about a young person growing up with a chronic illness and repeated surgeries and how that changes their outlook and perspective and how they show up in the world. We don't always focus on that part. And now what are you doing and how are you showing up and how has that influenced your perspective? And so it's beautiful that you're taking that experience and turning it into a children's book series, not just for the kids, but for the parents. You're also, as a parent, able to add that. You're now able to maybe be the gift that your mom needed. Maybe be that message that your mom also needed with you. How do I talk about this with my 7-year-old? How do I talk about knee replacement with, a 16-year-old?
Yes.
Where image is everything and ability is everything and fitting in and being like everyone else is everything at 16. How do you talk about that? So it's definitely a gift that you're sharing with other people to be vulnerable and tell this story and then translate that and your learning and development. And translate that into children's books. So,
thank you.
Is it triggering for you to go through that writing process and the illustration process and seeing your little self in the book, essentially?
I don't know yet. When I was writing it, it wasn't. It makes me think about it more maybe than I have in the past. So it does make me think, man, that's a lot to take on at that age. But the book itself is pretty simple. The messaging of it, the word choices, right? So I don't know. My illustrator has it right now. So I haven't even seen initial sketches quite yet. I'm really excited to do that. I did intentionally not make it look like me. I don't want the character to look like me. I actually want it to be, I want more representation for other groups of people as well in my book. So I'm basing it off of my niece who's Brazilian American. So it'll look like her, but have scars. So I kind of intentionally maybe did that as well to separate the emotion from it. I think that what might be harder for me, I do think growing up with illness makes you overly empathetic. Not that that's a bad thing, but you have to learn how not to take on other people's pain. I can feel pain in my body when I see people in pain. And I have therapy for that. But I think that once I have the book and go out and start reading it, and if I meet kids with scars that, already when people have emotion around the subject matter, I'm like, it's a lot, and I appreciate it, but that will be the more challenging part, perhaps. So that's why I go to therapy every week.
We love that here. We love therapy here.
I know you do. But I will say, I do hope it's a resource for people to have conversations with their kids. I think it's very generational that when I was growing up, I don't think anyone really took into account what that was doing to me psychologically, socially, emotionally. There wasn't a lot of discussion about that, at least in my memory. I know for sure doctors weren't talking about that. I don't know if they do now. I'm not sitting in pediatric rheumatology rooms right now with patients, but I hope that we're in a place in the world where we've evolved a little bit to understand that we need to be taking care of kids in all ways when they have a physical disability, because it's a lot more than just physical. When your body doesn't do what it's supposed to do, I don't like using the word supposed to, but I do a lot. So when your body doesn't do what it's supposed to do, it can feel like you're trapped in the wrong body. And that messes with you. Sometimes, especially since having kids, I have moments where I'm very sad because I wish that all the energy and passion and aspiration that I have, I wish I could just do it all physically. Because I think about how much more I could do if my body would help me out. And that it's just kind of a day-to-day, like, how do I feel? What's happening in my body? It might slow me down, might shut me down for a while. And kids feel that too. So it's just... it's a lot more than just physical, and I wish that is a thing that I wish when I was a kid, I wish that people had addressed that for me. But I'm addressing it now, so, And
it's a lesson for everybody. We all age and lose ability. There's so many reasons why our bodies aren't doing what is in our mind.
Yes.
So it's an issue for everybody, and representation means your book is for everybody too.
Yes.
So families without medical issues in their household should be reading this book to their children so their children can understand, oh, this is why my classmate, doesn't have hair right now. They have leukemia, or this is why my classmate, has different abilities. So having the goal of representation and inclusion and validation should be for everybody. It shouldn't just be, this book is for this family. No, this book is for all the families in the classroom to build that empathy and understanding and language. I've learned a lot of times people just don't have the words, and so they completely avoid the conversation because they don't have any words for it. Rather than feel foolish, or rather than be uncomfortable themselves and then think they're making someone else uncomfortable. They don't say anything. And kids can almost be the example, because kids are so, well, where'd you get that scar from?
Yes. Oh, it's the funniest thing, because think about it. My knees are at eye level for a lot of children. So in the summers, if I'm in Target, every kid is following my knees across the room, right? And they're just, they're wide open.
Yeah.
So when writing the book, I really considered, what's my point of view on, should other kids openly say, what scar do you have? Or am I encouraging kids to do something they're not comfortable with? I don't know. And the answer is I don't know. And it's person to person. And parents hopefully are instilling, you don't have to talk about, show, whatever, anything you don't want to talk about. But I think that part of the problem is we like you said, we hesitate and we kind of say like, we almost make it worse for our kids because our kids don't care. They're very open, they're very honest, and they really appreciate differences in other people if we don't make it weird.
And kids also, when they ask these questions, they're not coming to the conversation with intention.
Yes.
And adults, you know, when they say, what happened to your arm? They have like a power trip connected to it sometimes, you know, when really that's more of like, we're in a relationship and you'll tell me when you're comfortable.
Yeah.
And I always am fascinated with people who feel as if they need to dive into someone's story. Where are you from? What's your deal? Are you married? Because I'm like, if the person trusts you, it's a part of their identity, they're going to bring it up.
Yeah.
They know it's the most prominent thing happening here.
Yes.
They're going to share it with you when they're comfortable with you or when you deserve it.
Yes.
And so kids come at it so much more differently than adults, for sure. Adults always have that weird, you know, I need to know and I deserve to know. And truly, your surgeries and your health issues are your story, your private issue that you share when you're comfortable with people or when it serves a bigger purpose for you.
Right.
Such as this platform. You know, everybody isn't in a place with their chronic illness or their health past to sit and share it openly.
Yes.
And so that's why we're so grateful when people do share a personal obstacle, because it means they've been through it and they're ready to give that advice to other people of how they managed it, how they can get through it, and how it's still an everyday thought and conversation and hurdle and therapy session and, you know.
Yeah. And you talked about representation. It's interesting because when I started working on my manuscript, I hired a freelance editor to do a few different types of edits for me on my manuscript. She was awesome. She gave me so much information about the publishing industry that I really didn't pay her for, so I love her. I appreciate her. And her opinion on the book for traditional publishing was that it wasn't, the subject matter didn't have a large enough audience. And for traditional publishing. So she gave me some ideas around what I could do to widen my audience, but I would have had to change the story. And she said, this is a really personal story. I totally get it if you don't want to do that. And I don't. But I found it so interesting that I don't think that's not just her opinion. That's true about the industry for children's picture book publishing. But I find that to be such an interesting perspective because I do think it's a book for everyone. And I think that, lucky for us, we live in a time where parents want their kids to be exposed to all different types of people. That has evolved very quickly because it has not been that way throughout my life or your life, right? So I, as a parent, want my children to learn about people that are different from them or have different abilities than them or look different than them. I want all of that for my kids because I don't want them to live in a bubble. I want them to have appreciation for people who are different than us. And so I think I found that to be a really interesting opinion from the industry because I wrote the book for kids with scars so that they could see themselves, and for kids without scars so that they could have empathy and understanding for other people and be curious about other people.
That is a widespread epidemic in products, beauty products, in clothing, in movies, films. You know, people, particularly marginalized groups, are fighting for representation, and the pushback is always there's no money in that, there isn't a big enough demand. And that dictates what we're all able to consume, support, purchase, know about. One of the best catalysts in my own life for exposure and knowledge has been social media. Getting on Instagram and seeing people who use sign language and learning, you know, from a distance where they're safe and I'm not offensive, and I'm learning from a distance about what that looks like, what that means, how they do their day to day, you know, and it normalizes it. And it also gives me a way to have a conversation. It also gives me the ability to have more empathy because it's not this mysterious thing I saw one time in a Friends episode 15 years ago. Like, there's actually someone there sharing it with me. And it also opens the door to, we want to be heard and seen and represented and welcomed and normalized in so many, for lack of a better word, normalized.
Yeah.
Incorporated,
Yes.
acclimated.
Yeah.
Yeah. From here on, how do you feel your journey with chronic illness? How do you feel like that you can give someone advice from where you are today? Because not a lot of people are diagnosed so young. Many people are diagnosed as adults. And as you alluded to earlier, you didn't lose anything you didn't know you had.
Right.
That is a totally different conversation for someone who loses something they knew they had.
Yes.
So what would your advice be to people going through that journey?
Gosh, it's all so personal and individual based on the situation. Some people have very mild disease and it can be controlled pretty well. I mean, of course, if someone's diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis or any type of arthritis in adulthood, you do need to see a rheumatologist. Find one that you love. I've spent a lot of time with rheumatologists that I don't love. And I only really in the past 10 years have started having a rule around doctors, because I probably have 10 doctors. Like a full body yes. I have to walk out of that office and love that doctor, know that they're there for me. They're listening to what I'm saying, looking at me a little bit more holistically than just trying to get to my joints. So find a rheumatologist that you love, but at the same time, start looking at perhaps natural ways of helping yourself fight your disease. So the biggest thing with arthritis is diet, and that's not fun. That feels like more loss for a lot of people, and it is. But sugar, gluten, sometimes dairy, depends, right? That's why elimination diets are a big thing for people with any type of chronic illness. So looking into nutrition and what might be triggering your body to create more inflammation. We know for a fact that food can be extremely inflammatory in the body. And it's just because you have some sort of allergic reaction to it. And it manifests in different ways in different people's bodies. Mm-hmm. So in my case, gluten and sugar particularly, if I eat a cookie, I can feel it within an hour in my wrists. So I only know that because I experimented with it and just cut it out for a couple weeks to see what would happen. It's unfortunate, but it's healthier for me anyway. And the truth is, my husband will say, he has such a sweet tooth, and he'll say, I need to cut this out. I need to cut this out. We have conversations about it. And I just am always reminded of how much easier it is for me because I feel bad instantly. Like it makes me less mobile, and I don't want to be that. So at the same time, I find it a little bit easier to avoid stuff that I know hurts me, and it's instant almost.
That is such a glass half full outlook because, right, these things are unhealthy for all of us, but it's a marathon for many people. For you, it's the sprint. It's unhealthy. But it's such a, I'm grateful my body responds this way. And it seems as if that is a big key to getting through this.
Yeah.
To living with it every day is changing your outlook on it.
Well, I'm not sure how I would be here if I hadn't. I mean, it could completely shut you down.
Yeah.
And I'd be lying if I didn't say that it does sometimes, but you have to keep your mental health in check. It could be so easy to be depressed all the time. I mean, it's rough. It's a full-time job to have an aggressive medical condition for anybody. So yeah, I think advice around nutrition. The thing about arthritis is it makes it hard to move. So you feel like on days where you're stiff and your joints are swollen and my ankles are really, really bad, and ankle replacements are not as good as other joints because they're so intricate. So I can't have them yet. I go back and ask for them like every 2 years. On the mornings where I'm really stiff and I'm finding it hard to get moving, it can feel like you want to move as little as possible But the antidote to arthritis is moving. And so even just like getting out for a walk for 10 minutes, if you can really have a big short and long-term impact on someone with RA. So as much movement or exercise, low impact exercise as you can. I've found for myself recently, I realized I tried so many different ways of working out. We're going to trainers. No one knows what to do with me because I need so many accommodations. I finally found a physical therapist who is also a trainer, and she is working with me on basic like stability, balance, strength, and it's just what I need. So you have to take the time to really think about what you need and go figure out if that's a thing in the world. And it turns out a physical therapist trainer is a thing over off of Park Road. So it worked out.
And also the mental health component.
Yes.
Making sure. And so have you dipped in and out of therapy throughout your life, or was that something, once your daughter and your son get to a certain age, you have a little bit more time and you can focus on yourself?
I didn't really start going to therapy around my disease until probably about the time my kids were born. Parents know that when your kids are born, you're suddenly like, I got to figure this out. Like, I want to be a good example. I want my kids to see me healthy and I need to figure some things out. Right. So I started going to therapy, and it's funny when I would say things to my therapist, like, well, when I was 3, I was in a coma in Novant, and here's the story. And I woke up on Thanksgiving, and the therapist's like, wait, that happened to you? I'm like, yeah. She's like, I've been seeing you for a year. You haven't brought this up. That's extremely traumatic. And I'm like, it is? I mean, legit, I had no idea. It's just, you can go for your whole life without realizing that these things have a big impact on your body, your mind, like your spirit. Yeah. And so only then did I start to really realize like how that manifested in me, the things I did socially to ensure that everyone would accept me and overlook my disability or my scars. I mean, I'm a real people pleaser. I'm a real celebrate everybody. I mean, I lay it on in friendship. And I think that's also who I am, but I think I really amped it up as a kid. So there's a lot of behavior that comes into play when you're trying to be normal. And unfortunately, no one really brought that to my attention until really more recent, in the past 10 years. So it's only been something that I've been working on for a short time.
And I think that is on timeline with so many women. They get to a certain age and they're tired.
Yes.
They add on responsibilities and they don't have the bandwidth and they break.
Yes.
And therapy is the outlet that can help them discover why they finally broke. It's been building up for so long. And everybody has a different reason why they got there, for sure. But unpacking it and realigning your boundaries and behaviors that can benefit you and your loved ones. You can still be a people pleaser to the people who matter the most, in the space that you have the capacity.
Right.
So yeah, therapy is definitely really good for that.
Yes.
And I definitely appreciate when you tell your story and people are horrified. I've had those experiences too, where I'm just matter of fact about it. I hear it's called compartmentalizing. And you think, is that really bad? And then a lot of people will say, well, it could have been worse.
And I say
it could have been worse. So I think, people listening and watching, who are having those feelings of, yeah, some really bad stuff happened to me, and people kind of respond oddly when I talk about it.
Yeah.
And if you have a tendency of saying it could have been worse, maybe there might be some things to look at and unpack. And it is so true. The body keeps score. Mm-hmm. I've gone through so many therapeutic healing processes, purging trauma.
Yeah.
And I imagine your body has both physical and emotional, mental trauma to purge, which is just a little bit more intense work.
Yeah. And I think it's a good point that a lot of people say, it could be worse. That's how I got through my life, especially until more recent years, and a lot of that comes from like a religious upbringing as well, right? It's like, well, it could be worse. I'm not dying. I don't have a terminal illness. And it's interesting because I think I still will say to this day, I think perspective is so important. But I think the hard thing that I didn't know how to live in a space where it's true that it could be worse, and also this sucks. And I have the right to mourn what I don't have, and to wish that things were different and that I could go ice skating and roller skating with my kids or run. I've never run a day in my life. So it's okay for me to feel that why did this happen to me, to try to scramble against that, to wish that my day-to-day were different, and also realize that I have an amazing life. And I think for a long time I couldn't hold those things together. And I still struggle with that. I don't really know how to balance that, but every time you turn around, you get perspective, right? And there's other types of issues that I go, I don't know how I could do that. And everyone says, well, you would if you had to, right? So people look at me and they think the same thing.
It's exciting that your children's book series is going to be what you needed growing up, be what your mom needed, guiding you through those really tumultuous experiences and painful and scary, uncertain moments.
Yeah, and that's like classic psychology, right? Like here I am, I'll be 40 this year. I'm creating what I needed when I was a kid. So I think the ironic thing about all of this for me too is I would have told you, like I said all the time in college, right after college, I would look my mom dead in the face. I will not do anything with arthritis. I deal with it enough. I'm not building like a life around this. My life is already built around it. I don't want to think about this anymore. I don't owe anything to anyone. Like it's hard enough for me to deal with it by myself. And I just almost, I marched like the opposite direction away from having any calling to serve or go back and help assist anyone who was struggling with the same thing. And now here I am. I think it's kind of been a midlife thing for me as well, is just thinking about like, okay, this isn't going away. It's almost like it's really settling in. I'm going to have this for the rest of my life. What does that look like? How, and really once I had kids, it's like, gosh, kids, it just really gave me much more compassion and purpose for kids in general, of course, but thinking about my little self, and knowing that kids are at Levine dealing with that right now, right? There's like a floor for that at Levine now for rheumatology. So they've come a long way, but we need to bring up the other resources to the same level for those kids.
For sure. I think also too, everybody is on a different timeline for when they're able to help others.
Yeah.
So it takes some people longer to learn how to swim, and you can't help anybody else swim if you can't swim.
Yes.
So I think it's important that we all honor our own timeline in healing. And that's why we have women choose their own personal obstacle that you feel as if you've been through, and you can guide other people, because sometimes it's too raw, even if it's 40 years old.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, I feel like I've done enough work at this point to where I can like confidently, take on trying to help in the public space with the issue that I deal with day to day. That doesn't mean I might not cry when I read it out loud or something like that. We'll see. It's to be determined.
It's all part of the process. It's all part of the healing. Well, Michelle, we are honored that you would be here on season 2 with us, and you would share your occupation and your obstacle. And I can't wait to see the feedback that we get from people who say thank you for revealing, and also thank you for helping me be seen.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
This She Dreams in Color interview series is part of the mission and purpose of the She Dreams in Color Foundation. The foundation works to provide free therapy to women who are marginalized, but also to destigmatize mental illness and the need for mental health care. So one of the ways we're able to raise money for the therapy that we provide the community is through merchandise. So this shirt, a work of art, was designed by Charlotte graphic designer Daps Designs, Dominique Prescott, and is for sale on our website. We also have merchandise like mugs, notebooks, and stickers, and every purchase, all of the proceeds go directly to the foundation and is a tax write-off. Thank you for supporting our cause and our foundation, and thank you for being an audience member.